Hello, and welcome back to the weekly comic book podcast called First Issue Club. You're in it. We're doing it right now. I'm your current host right now, Greg. In the club with me today is
Mike DeStacy.
And a very other special guest that is popping in,
Andy Vargas.
Andy, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me. Stoked to be here.
It's the spooky week. You're hearing this a couple days before Halloween, so I hope it didn't scare you with my spooky ghost voice.
Got it. Yeah. No one's ready for this stuff yet.
Chills.
You have to wait 3 more days.
That's what makes it even scarier. Like you're expecting it to be on Monday, but First Issue Club hits you Wednesday before with the boo-hoos and the creaky story.
We've been planning this for years, folks.
Right. This has been 10 years in the making.
Hit them on October 28th.
We have some special guests. We're not doing that this year. We typically on Halloween we have like those big extravagant episodes. You do a fantastic job editing them.
Yeah.
Not the case this year.
I'm traveling this week.
Yeah, and
No time to edit.
So this is raw. So anything scary you hear is us messing up and getting someone's name wrong when we talk about a book.
Yeah.
Which is horrifying.
Yeah, releasing an unedited podcast is about as scary as it gets.
It truly is. In this week's episode, we're going to talk about the rise of 90s nostalgia, some scary books that have really stuck with us over the years, some book recommendations from the week, and whatever else pops into our mind. Mike D., I think you had a couple newsy hits for us before we get going.
I did. One, I wanted to mention Vita Ayala's New Mutants run has come to a close. And I just wanted to shout that out as something that I've really enjoyed. The 30th issue was I think Marvel put it as like a love letter mosaic to New Mutants. So there's a lot of like throwback. They're like telling each other stories about them growing up. And so you get a lot of like littering of New Mutants past. I've really enjoyed the return to Limbo that Vita Ayala did. And we got this gold armor for Magic, which seems to be something that's sticking around.
Yeah, is she transformed? Is she going to another team?
Not that I know of. As far as I know, she's sticking on New Mutants, but maybe not. She's been in and out of Strange Academy as a professor. They've teased over the past couple years that there's like maybe some Doctor Strange crossover that's going to happen, like furthering that Strange Academy stuff, but it hasn't happened yet.
Okay.
But New Mutants, I think, was just an exciting run that they did. New person writing it, and Escapade is a new character that was introduced during one of those Marvel Voices Pride books.
Yes. Yeah.
And is joining the New Mutants as of the next issue to come out, issue 31.
Have they announced who the new writer is?
They have. It's not someone I'm familiar with.
Oh, okay.
So excited to see what they do with this arc that's all about kind of bringing Escapade to Krakoa and introducing that character.
So you said issue 30 was like a celebration of New Mutants.
Exactly right.
Was Cannonball in it? And did he say, I'm not invulnerable when I'm blasting?
100% yes.
Thank you.
Both of these things happened. I'm like, when you're taking a retrospective and looking back and you're homaging all the things that need to be homaged, that's part of the canon. Cannonball canon.
Haha.
I'm not invulnerable when I'm blasting has to be in there. If you don't know why we're bringing this up, there's a rant from me somewhere about a interaction with Chris Claremont where that I had. We never covered off on this, did we? An update to the story since.
Oh, because Joe,
our
friend Joe.
So let me explain myself.
Yes, go ahead.
I talked to Chris Claremont at a convention, and I'm like, huge Cannonball fan. He's one of my favorite characters. Just got a remark from Bob McLeod on this cover. I was like, I would love it if you wrote his famous quote on the cover. And Chris Claremont's like, what quote? And I'm like, I'm nigh invulnerable when I'm blasting. And he was like, Cannonball wouldn't say that.
Right.
Very, very definitively.
Let me step in here. We found screenshots of the comic book and posted them online of Cannonball saying this in the comic.
In several issues that Chris Claremont 100%
multiple
and
issues.
Since then, it is like become a constantly reused thing. It's like his go-to line. So ultimately, when I'm having this interaction with Chris Claremont, it's very uncomfortable, and he's like, Cannonball would say, "I love Leela," who was like the rock star character in New Mutants that he dated.
Yeah.
And so he writes, "I love Leela" on the cover of my comic, which is like,
whatever.
you'd have to be me to know that. It's like something related to Cannonball.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Like a super fan. Flash forward to this past year at which Comic-Con? Do you know?
I think he went to, oh man,
Was it Emerald City?
I think it was Emerald
Yeah.
City.
Yeah.
Our buddy Joe goes and asks if Chris Claremont would do the exact same thing. Pulls up, same book, same situation, and it's just like, "Hey man, I'd love if you'd write the famous Cannonball phrase.
yeah.
I'm nigh invulnerable when I'm blasted."
And wasn't taking no for an answer.
Which maybe I should have been a little more insistent, because
yeah.
ultimately Joe got what he asked for. But
I think
he got this,
dug in.
but he got more guff than I was comfortable handling, I
Mm-hmm.
think. Because I folded immediately when he was like, "Cannonball wouldn't say that." I was just like, "Yes, sir."
Yes, Chris. Of course, Chris.
But Joe's issue doesn't say I'm nigh invulnerable when I'm blasting. It's like I'm almost invulnerable when I'm blasting off or something like.
I think Chris Claremont maybe takes umbrage with the fact that like Cannonball became more of like a country bumpkin
Mm-hmm.
over the issues, and nigh is a word that would not have been in his vocabulary.
Sure, yeah. So
Um,
he's like an ostrich in the sand now. Just his head is in there. Like, nope, no. Would never ever say that.
So yeah, he got a version of this written on his
Yeah.
comic only after Chris Claremont's handler
Yes.
was like, he like looked to him for like assurance,
Uh-huh.
and he was like, it's kind of his thing that he says that. Like,
Chris, he says that a
like
lot.
he says it like every issue he's in.
He says that in the issue you're holding.
And, well, the funny thing is, like, when he...
Well, when I had it,
Yes, he did it.
He flipped through the issue like you flip through a magazine, like,
Oh my!
and he goes, "Nope, not in there." And I was like, "What? You didn't even look at a single. There's no way you could have read a single word."
I don't need to. I wrote it.
And I want to emphasize, Chris Claremont, one of my all-time heroes, one of the all-time comic book writing greats, like more than a cemented canon for the X-Men, like
Yeah.
is like the reason the X-Men are what they are today.
Yes.
So huge fan of his, and small gripe. He was so cool and talked to me for a really long time and so many other people for a long time. But why this particular thing was a sticking point, I have no clue. So congrats to Joe on a killer piece in your collection that I guarantee like no one else has, because of how much-
85% there.
Yeah, exactly right.
Next time, if he ever comes to Planet, you should just write it out for him and have him sign the quote.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Right.
You don't have to author this; just okay it.
If Chris Claremont ever comes to Planet again, we're all getting shirts printed that say, "I'm nigh invulnerable when I'm blasting. Cannonball, maybe." And then, like, so funny.
I cannot troll Chris Claremont.
I can. Don't worry.
So I'll leave it to you
Yeah,
guys.
I got you.
So yeah, I did want to shout out Vita Ayala's run, which I just thought was fantastic, and I'm excited to see what they do next. Okay, the other thing that stuck out to me on my topics this week was that the highest 10 prices of all time for comics were sold in the last 2 years. So highest selling comics ever,
Yeah.
all in the past 2 years.
Okay.
Whoa, really?
Yeah. And it's just interesting to see the escalation of collectibles over the past couple years.
Mhm.
And it's funny that like we've got this point where COVID, like people are getting out more often, and but the collectible game is still strong. And like even though the economy is kind of dipping now, we kind of expected that collectible market to crash again.
Mhm.
And so far, this hasn't really happened.
I would love it if it did, so I could buy more
So you
fun
could
things.
scoop up more
Yeah.
comics. But one of the things that I thought was interesting about the Action Comics #1 that made a lot of headlines, that sold for $3.4 million recently, was bought in January for $3.2 million, and I didn't realize that person had flipped that comic so quickly. So flipping comics is a big boys game too.
I wonder if you just like
you can make a cool $200,000 between like
Dude.
January and August flipping Action Comics #1. And another interesting thing about that particular issue is that it's referred to as the Rocket issue, which I think is like any Action Comics #1 is like notable at this point in a good grade just because there are so few of them. So this one has a Rocket stamp that a little kid had put on it, the original owner, when he was 13 years old. And so it's just known as the Rocket copy. It's traded hands several times at this point. It's been auctioned off tons.
That's sick.
And it comes with the original stamp that the kid
shit.
used. So they've always paired it from the original owner's stamp.
Quick
that he put on
question:
it.
Is the stamp CGC'd?
It is not in a case, not pristine,
Worthless.
Yeah, this is very good stamp at best, grading wise.
I love the niche CGC graded stuff. Like there's the Rocket variant, there's the Mark Jeweler variants, and then the Disgruntled Girlfriend variant.
That's the best one.
Where someone drew some angry girlfriend wrote a bunch of stuff on like Spider-Man #12 or something.
Yeah.
It's like a really low issue, and someone got it graded, and it's now just like a joke in the community that like whenever it comes up for sale, like at auction or eBay, people like bid on it because it's like this like unique thing to have in the collection.
Yeah,
But
right.
it's like first issue of Dr. Octopus or something. Like it's some sort of notable issue. But
yeah.
It's got like "fuck you, Steve" written on the cover or something.
So like that
the
stuff's
lore
so
of
awesome.
those are like, yeah, it almost makes it like more of a sought after
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
thing. Yeah,
And
I
like
love
the Don Rosa collection is like highly regarded because
it's a pedigree collection.
Yeah, like-
it's I don't know how many that CGC acknowledges as pedigree collections, but there are a handful, if you don't know this already, that if you get a book CGC'd from that collection, they'll print the name of the collection that it came from, which is kind of cool. I don't own any of those, but like the guy who started Mile High Comics, I think was the first
Wow.
the first pedigree collection that CGC acknowledged.
That's insane.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of my bucket list things is to go to Mile High Comics.
Definitely.
I've never been.
I think it's the world's largest quote unquote comic book shop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I actually do have one news item that's kind of cool for Kansas City people.
Hey.
So I picked up the facsimile edition of Tomb of Dracula 1 this last, 2 weeks ago now. And I was flipping through it, and they have the original advertisement pages in there, right? One of the advertisements on the ad page in that facsimile edition is for Clint's Comics.
are you kidding me?
Whoa.
Yeah. So Tomb of Dracula #1, if you have an original copy, you can find an ad for Clint's Comics in it.
Which is a local Kansas City shop.
Yeah.
That's kind of rad.
Isn't that cool?
One of the things about these like, you don't realize how much of a gem Clint's Comics is until you go to other cities and you're like, these are the comic shops? Like, we are in one of these cities where you're kind of spoiled to have such a massive comic shop that it's really big, just rows and rows and rows of long boxes. The new comic shelves are just like go on forever compared to a lot of your typical shops that are in like strip malls and things like that. It's a really cool shop.
They are stuffed with back issues.
They've got a basement full of comics that they won't let you down in. God knows why they haven't turned that into shoppable space. But they've got like an entire library of vintage comics down there that they'll bring up like one at a time if you ask for like something specific that they don't have out. So really cool shop. I'm going to Madison, Wisconsin next week, and I've got a couple shops on my list to check out.
Are there some
So-
notable shops up there? Or just
There aren't really. There's like
Okay.
there's no shops that I saw that were like these are destination shops. But maybe I'll have some shop tales by the time I get back.
Are you gonna get some cheese curds and some beer while you're up there?
One of the only things that I asked to do was get cheese curds.
If anything else, load me up with cheese curds.
And it's the same thing when people come to Kansas City and they're like, "What's the one thing I have to do here?" And I'm like, "Get burnt ends." And I was like, "What's the one thing to do in Madison?" And it's cheese curds. So I got to do it.
can you smuggle cheese curds back, or will they like check you with
I was
that?
gonna fill my backpack with just
Just
loose
curds.
cheese curds.
He's trying to sneak in curds.
The whole plane's just gonna stink. But yeah, that was yeah. I think that's all we had for news hits.
Yeah, right on. Well, like I mentioned at the top, the 90s have never been hotter, you guys.
Yeah.
90s comics, well, in the 1900s, I'll say, comics
Wow, we're getting a real history
were in a
lesson.
realm of their own. And the 90s were really scattered. You had the plummet at the beginning, and then the kind of resurgence of the 1990s and 1998s.
Yeah.
The reason I want to bring this up is because the FOC this week, you have 90s variants for DC Comics, which is like all of the retro costumes from 90s DC characters, long-haired Superman, and like Batman with like the sharp shoulder pads that make no fucking sense. It's like when Todd McFarlane was drawing them. And in all the Justice League books, they're embossed.
Embossed.
Embossed. Good God. They're embossed.
You're not making it any fancier.
No.
What can I get for these embossed copies?
When I said that, my pinky was literally out. It's like they're the Grey Poupon of comics. And, Donny Cates and Stegman are doing Vanish, which is like, it is no illusion that it's just like a love story for 90s comics and like basically trying to do their version of Spawn. Speaking of Spawn, Greg Capullo and Todd McFarlane are doing a huge Batman Spawn crossover in December, which is a lead out from Spawn and Batman when Frank Miller and Todd McFarlane wrote it like 30 years ago. So as 90s kids, are you happy to see all of this resurgence of your youth just hitting you in the face?
This is a very interesting question because for me, like part of the 90s is like all these comics are trash and worthless and they overprinted so many of them.
Right.
And not to say that like that's why we're buying comics is just for collectability, but also I do think that certain comics that I've heard or have friends that romanticize things like Prophet
Yeah. Pit.
are like so convoluted and hard to follow for me, or they lean into a lot of the like tropes of the time so hard that retroactively when I go back and look at them, they're difficult to read. So I don't think I have as much of the 90s nostalgia kick as some people do. I'm like, the people that I'm a fan of from the 90s that I'll like live and die for as a fan are still making comics and are still very active. Like Jim Lee does tons of DC covers and I can buy a Jim Lee cover anytime I want. Humberto Ramos does like plenty of stuff right now and I can still be a fan of his in current comic books.
Right.
I think if some of like my heroes from the 90s had trailed off a bit more, I would be more like, why don't they come back? But the people I love are still kind of around and relevant in the industry today.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Jim Lee, and Wildcats is coming back on Image for like a short run, and like I think Wildcats in like Wetworks is like the epitome of indie 90s comics, like dollar bin fodder now.
Well, and especially we were all kids when these were coming out, right? So the books that had cartoons like Wildcats even more so like hit me in my feels from the nostalgia sense of that. The funny thing is there are books that like I rediscovered as an adult that came out in the 90s, and those might be the books I'm more excited about than the ones that were so popular to have made it to like 8-year-old to 13-year-old me. You know what I mean? Like
Really?
I wasn't reading Monkey Man and O'Brien when I was like 10, you know what I mean?
Right.
But now I'm like, man, if that book could come back now, that would be fucking killer. Like I'd love an Arthur Adams ongoing book.
Sure. Like I wasn't reading Concrete when I was 11.
Great example.
And like Concrete, if you don't know about it, is like melodramatic, super heady, like the emo thing, essentially. It's just like, it's about a man who's transformed into a giant rock and like all of the shit he has to go through with that, and it's like it's by Paul Chadwick, and it's fucking beautiful. Like the line work in it is insane. But yeah, like I had to rediscover that book when I was in like a junior or senior in high school. Like in the 90s when I was 12 or 13, I was like, what the fuck is this garbage? I want my goddamn Wildcats.
Totally. I mean, same thing with like Milk and Cheese.
Yes.
And Hate.
Yeah.
And all these like really Flaming Carrot, all these like edgy comics that were like late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s.
Yeah.
Like no way I'd have a nostalgic relationship with those because I was too young.
Uh-huh.
But those are the books that stick out to me as things that like I would love for that sort of vibe to come back to comics.
Just like the anarchist indie like pub.
Yeah.
Like I'm making a comic to make a commentary about comics.
Yes.
And to just be fucking weird.
Right. And to your point about Donny Cates being a very nostalgic comic book writer and hitting some of those feels, like he's doing that but in a different way. He's writing comics that are like a commentary on the medium, but not in a way that like is just like, oh, fuck society, everything blows. It's a take on that superhero trope stuff that we just got fed like tons of in the 90s.
It's like, what if Spawn had some restraint?
Right.
Well, that's the stuff that's interesting to me. I didn't grow up reading comics. I got into comics when I was a college kid. So I like the aesthetic of the 90s as a throwback thing. But like, yeah, the stories and the creators and stuff, I have no like allegiance to. So yeah, bring back, the sick ass acetate covers and, like the
and they are
embossed, covers,
hey.
The metallic covers, like all that stuff is great. But yeah, if you're going to bring back a comic, like make it read well and also have the 90s aesthetic. Right.
I mean the 90s
that's a great point. It is the aesthetic that we're after here more than anything. And when I think about who I was a fan of in the 90s, all artists. I didn't have a clue who was writing anything.
Right.
It was all who made Wolverine look the most badass.
Yeah.
All I cared about.
The funniest thing about the 90s is Wolverine's claws were always different lengths depending on the artist. I mean, like Sam Keith drew his like through the like they're like yardsticks coming out of his knuckles, and then like he had like the bone claws, and like Wolverine was like fucking everywhere in the 90s, and he was maybe one of the most polarizing character designs depending on who drew him.
You know who I was thinking about the other day, and this is kind of like a nostalgia thing. It might be on like it's on the later end of like the era we're talking about, but I loved Joe Madura growing up. And his style had a little bit of a anime manga influence, I think.
What was he famous for?
Probably Uncanny X-Men.
Okay.
The most so. He also did that Image book Battle Chasers that was like
Holy
cliffhanger
shit.
comics.
Yes.
And I think his style was just perfect for me at the time because we grew up watching like Dragon Ball Z and all these other like things from Japan, and having that style clash with like American pop art and comic books was like right in the feels for me. And I think his art like totally influenced where a lot of American comic art went.
Oh, for sure.
After that, but his name is something that I don't hear referenced very often. So shout out to Joe Mad,
who's a listener,
who loves First Issue.
Well, like him and like you mentioned Huberto Ramos, like his
both cliffhanger guys on Image.
Yeah, and like his body parts were so extreme, and like the facial features were like really really wild. Like those two guys really influenced, I think, a younger generation of artists going forward, like you said. So, both of those guys. Huge First Issue Club fans, so they're probably blushing right now that we're talking about them.
Yeah, probably.
We'll sign some stuff for you guys if you just want to DM us your addresses. We'll send
I'm nigh invulnerable when I'm blasting.
First
Greg
Issue
Lichtai.
Club swag out. Yep.
Todd McFarlane, not a fan, so he's not listening. I know that for sure. We can say whatever we want about Todd.
He's too busy doing promo for the new Spawn movie.
Did you see his promo stuff for the Spawn movie? It's basically like he made it in notes with like a pin, just like Spawn update coming tomorrow. And it's just like the biggest grandpa thing I've ever seen of like, their kids are going to love this. It's like, leave it to the marketing department, Todd.
Hey, he's excited too.
He is amped.
Yeah.
And the movie comes out in like what, 2 years? Like Jamie Foxx is attached.
His big announcement was that they found a director. So like,
Yeah. We found someone to make it. It's like you thought a trailer was coming or something.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to the reason why everyone's here. Comic books.
Yeah.
It was a big week last week. A lot of cool stuff came out. I read some cool comics I want to talk about. First of all, I don't know if you guys did. Oh, fuck. I'll have to look it up. And this is the part where I'm scared because I don't have my notes up and it's not going to get edited out. And everyone's going to know I'm a Dorcas. Deadly Neighborhood Spider-Man by Taboo, B. Earl, and Juan Ferreira.
Yeah.
It's the Demon Bear's in it, which we talked about earlier with the New Mutants.
Uh-huh.
And the story was actually pretty good. I thought it was just going to be, it's a mini, so I thought it was just going to be like a money grab for covers or whatever. Because issue 1 obviously had like 13 different covers.
Here's the interesting thing about this book. Well, and I think this is the case, that this was an unlimited comic.
It was?
That was written specifically for the app.
Sure.
And then got turned into a printed comic. They've done the same thing for several X-Men Unlimited books.
Well, I'm glad I bought it.
And I could be wrong.
This
could be a situation wherein they've done a second volume of Deadly Neighborhood Spider-Man that is different from the original one that was on Unlimited.
Right.
Why make more comics when you can just print the comics that weren't printed before?
Exactly right.
That's good business.
You make me get online for digital content, and I pay for it there, and then I pay for it again once it gets printed.
To hold it in a different way.
So I can hold it differently, yes.
Anyway, yeah, well, everyone who listens knows that First Issue Club, huge Taboo fans. Big Taboo heads. And he did the Werewolf by Night 2 or 3 years ago.
Yes.
Which was, not his best work. Obviously.
You think reserved for music.
Let's get this party started. That's like peak Taboo. I think he wrote that. But this was actually a really good story about, Peter Parker doing research about sleep and dream science that will help cure diseases. A little bit of a reach, but hey, people, it's comic books.
Yeah.
But the artwork is the real star in this, and you get some really cool, trippy visuals, and the Demon Bear's in it, which is everyone's favorite bear antagonist.
Actually, my favorite bear antagonist is Grizzly.
Who's he? Oh, is that
He's the Ant-Man villain?
Yeah. Nope, Demon Bear gets it. So I read that, and then I read a book by John Ridley, GCPD, The Blue Wall. Now, I was apprehensive about this book because I was like,
because it's called The Blue Wall,
right? And like, do we need another
celebrating cops comic?
Cop book? It's not even like celebrating comics. And like, so John Ridley, who, if you don't know, wrote 12 Years a Slave, Undercover Brother, and
Alien, right?
Did he?
No,
maybe some.
That's not right.
It's Ridley Scott.
Ridley Scott. Yeah.
6 degrees of separation there. So like, phenomenal writer, and he also did some work on. He does a bunch of DC stuff already. And he did like some Batman Future State stuff, and he did the alternate or the other history of DC, which was like a Black Label book, which was fucking incredible. But I question why this book even needed to be done. Like, it is like a kind of a sob story of just like cops are the underdogs in Gotham and like the stuff they have to go through as cops, and it's just like this book seemed like it was like a year and a half too late to really be poignant in like the stuff that was really heated, 2 or 3 years ago with, and like, not like it's like fucking stopped or anything, but like the police brutality and like just like the overreaching power of the police. But like it wasn't terribly written. Like, it wasn't a badly written book. It just seems like out of place from where it should have been released.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest.
Yeah. You think if it would have hit a year and a half earlier, it would have like more people would have been talking about it.
Right. And it would have, helped with the conversation a little bit more, but like the conversation's already been had. So I'm wondering what is to be fleshed out here that hasn't already been talked about.
So when they announced this book, I know a lot of people were like, okay, DC's writing a cop book because they like cops. But with John Ridley writing it, my first thought was that they're making reference to the Blue Wall of Silence, which is like a cops defend cops,
right?
you know, like stance thing. So I wonder if as the series goes on, if it's going to get more subversive in that way.
Well, and that is addressed in this issue. Like
I didn't read it.
We follow these like 3 cadets who are graduating into becoming beat officers, and they're each put in 3 different locations, and we followed basically a day in the life of their first operations out on being like beat cops.
Yeah,
and they each encounter different unique situations that happen to them.
Oh, so they're all influenced in different ways, and it shapes their perspectives.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. And then we get the political aspect where like governors and police chiefs get involved and like try to like sway them one way or the other. And then like the issue always kind of culminates with them meeting up at the same bar to talk about their days and how they want to support each other. But to Andy's point, I think you're right. It may lead into that of just like, no matter what, a cop has a cop's back. And there is an interesting conversation to have there. And if it does roll into that, you know, that would be great. But, you know, I had that knee-jerk reaction of just like, do we need like a cop book right now?
Depends on what kind of cop book it is, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a certain point in time where you say, like, we need to remember that there are conversations to be had here and continue having those conversations. Otherwise, it's just like a news cycle thing that it's like, okay, we took care of being mad at cops.
Sure. Yeah.
Like,
and done.
We added 10 body cams, and now we're like, we're happy with the solution that we've found.
Like, I mean, and it is interesting because we don't really get many on the ground stories about law enforcement in superhero stories.
Sure.
It's always focusing on these big characters that can swoop down and use technology to take care of the bigger problems. But at the end of the day, people are still jaywalking and, you know,
we got to stop that.
Parking in non-parking spots and, you know, stuff that Batman can't be bothered with. He's not out there, you know, watching meters and giving tickets. So it is a unique take. And I am curious to see where it goes. And John Ridley hasn't written a bad DC book yet. So
I would absolutely read GCPE, Gotham City Parking Enforcement.
Yeah, but it's Batman.
Yeah, it's a low level Robin, like Robin 9.
Yeah, well, he's like the robot Robin out there, just like, you are 20 minutes late.
Penguin, your car is parked illegally in a red zone.
I just booted your car.
If we start to blur the lines with parking, where does it stop? Okay, so the book that I read most recently that was a first issue that I'm stoked on is Spider-Man, because we've got Dan Slott, Mark Bagley back at it again, 2 Spider-Man legends, and
in the same room.
And I think that this book's going to be really fun. If you don't know the situation with their book that they're writing.
I don't, so please fucking explain it to me.
So Zeb Wells is still writing Amazing Spider-Man.
Okay.
And on the sidelines over the last like 3 or 4 months, we've had these Edge of Spider-Verse books coming out, which are very fun.
They're incredible, like little vignettes of spider stories.
Exactly right. So we know anytime that there's a Spider-Verse, multiverse sort of story, we're going to bring in all these different Spider-Man characters. And every time they do it, Edge of Spider-Verse introduced. This is like the 3rd or 4th time they've done an Edge of Spider-Verse series.
Yeah,
it introduces characters from new multiverses that are going to get wrapped into the story,
right?
Which is really fun. A lot of first appearances, so they sell really well, and people dig them. Ultimately, not a lot's going to happen with these characters.
Well, people don't want to miss the Spider-Gwen.
Exactly right. If Spider-Gwen happens
those things sell out all the time.
I don't think we're going to have a repeat of Spider-Gwen anytime soon, but we'll see.
There's a spider dinosaur, so watch it.
That is true. So those all led up to what happened with Spider-Man 1. And it seems to me like they're saying, you know, Dan Slott's the guy who started the Spider-Verse stuff. He's the guy who's going to end the Spider-Verse stuff.
Yeah, nice.
So this book is supposed to culminate in the ending of the Spider-Verse. So whatever happens,
quote unquote.
Yeah, we'll see. You know what I mean? Anytime anything's supposed to be done, finished, wrapped up, It never really happens in comic books because comics.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that an attempt is going to be made to clean up the timeline and all the different realities a little bit.
So is it a sequel to Spider-Geddon?
Exactly right.
Okay.
So in this one, the first issue, a lot of things happen.
Okay.
Which I'll just
Hit
shout
it.
out here.
Yeah, yes.
Jessica Drew gets stabbed up the gut and like dissolves.
Yes. Okay.
Have you
Sorry.
seen this stuff happen?
I forgot I read this, and now that you're saying this stuff, it's all coming back to me.
Moreland has teamed up with the Spider Team, which is pretty wild.
That's pretty wild.
There's a handful of other things that I'm just like, reread the comic if you're interested in it. But I'm just saying,
Read the goddamn book.
the first issue takes a lot of big swings that I'm like, so much happened that was big in this that every subsequent issue,
Mm-hmm.
I just envision being like wackier and wackier.
Even wilder.
Right. Like you're going to do all that stuff in the first issue and then have it like cascade downward from here. Like, I don't think so. That's like not the way Dan Slott writes or works. So I think it's going to be a real wild, really fun series.
And
I'm just excited to have Dan Slott writing Spider-Man again.
correct me if I'm wrong. So I don't want to like mess up the Spider-Man lore, but like in the new Spider-Man #1, isn't like a new character controlling the misplaced multiverses Spider-Man and like changing them into like evil versions?
So there's a series coming up called Dark Web.
Yes.
And
Not the place on the internet.
exactly right. And we don't totally know how these things connect, but there is some like ancient mythology that's being wrapped into this new Spider-Verse story
Mm-hmm.
that leads you to believe that each of the individual spider people could be corrupted by like these bee stings. So
Okay.
that could be what leads into Dark Web, or
Mhm.
it could be something else entirely. We know from the Free Comic Book Day Spider-Man book that the Goblin Queen from X-Men is part of this.
Yes.
And so it could be like a demonic possession thing, and these two things could be a lot less related than we were talking about right now.
Okay.
Like I've seen some of that Dark Web stuff come out with Inferno branding, which is the old X-Men event
Mhm.
that dealt with Limbo and Madeline Pryor and all that kind of demon infestation on Earth stuff. So I think it's going to be more along the lines of that route.
Yeah, because when I read it, it sounded like there was like another like Madam Web character who can like touch the quote unquote web of the that every Spider-Man is connected to and like corrupt their individual line or something with that sting of whatever.
Yes, this is a thing.
Okay. Comics, everybody. You gotta love it.
These are things that like the more I read comics, the more I get stoked about these sort of things.
Right.
But I can also see in the rear view mirror that like 20 years ago me would be uber frustrated
Right.
because I'd be excited to check out this new big storyline that's happening
Mhm.
and then be like, I can't follow this.
You're
But-
exactly right. This is for old heads.
Yes.
This is maybe the worst entry point for new readers.
Yeah. And it's hard because as a new reader, you see these sort of things and you're like, I want to be a part of the conversation, but it's just very inaccessible.
That's why we
typically.
exist. To help.
Sure. I'll do what I can.
Tune in every week and Mike's going to give you an update.
No promises.
But it is like, sorry, Spider-Man #1 is following Peter Parker from the 6-1. Like it takes place in the 616.
Yes. It is the same Peter Parker that's in Amazing Spider-Man right now.
It's just like an adjacent
Yeah.
thing. Okay. Cool. Let me get out my Excel spreadsheet.
He's wearing the same suit that was given to him by Norman Osborn that he's wearing in Amazing Spider-Man right now. So it's
Right.
like 1-to-1 on timeline.
And he's
right
alive now. Right, Norman?
Norman's alive.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
God damn it.
His sins have been eaten.
By, I wonder who. I wonder if there's a character whose name was so on the nose.
Eating Sin Man. Got it. Got it.
Sin Muncher. Is that all you want to pip?
Yeah, exactly right. I know it's not very like super rad to like be like the one comic I want to draw everyone's attention to is Spider-Man.
Ever heard of him?
I could have picked an indie book, but I spent a lot of the indie books I was excited about last week in our
Right.
like top 5s we missed.
Oh, by the way, on the Discord, we got a little roasted for not talking about 8 Billion Genies.
Yes, great book.
Because we talked about it before the break that we took, but 8 Billion Genies is, of course, incredible.
Yes.
And if you
So
don't
you're
want to,
so you're saying that didn't qualify.
it didn't qualify because
Okay.
we already covered it.
Got it. Okay.
So I'm now taking the time
So
to
now Greg's very defensive.
take care of a few issues that we don't, that we're not on the pulse of comic book, hotspots.
Is that a DC book or a Marvel book?
Andy, unplug your mic for a minute, and it's great to have you. But if you don't want to read the comic, which why would you even be listening to this show? It's going to be a TV show on Amazon. 8 Billion Genies.
I loved the last issue I read, which was number 5, I think, and it was 8 months.
Yeah.
And it really fun. I love the progression of the story to be like the first 8 hours,
Yes.
8 days, 8 weeks, 8 months, and then the next issue is going to be 8 years.
And there's
So-
8 issues.
And there's 8 issues, so a lot of just fun things happening.
And there's 8 billion genies.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just
Every character has 8 teeth. Little known fact. Andy, what do you got?
what did I read recently?
Yes.
Sergeant Rock versus the Army of the Undead. You guys had to know that I was coming.
It written
hot
by
with that.
Bruce Campbell.
Yeah. Great story. It's a World War II action story starring everyone's favorite sergeant, Mr. Rock.
Does he have special powers, or is he just very good at war?
No, he's just good at guns.
Okay.
He's
He's the Punisher.
he's good at America, but not as they couldn't take Captain America because Marvel had him. So
Right,
they
yeah.
went with Sergeant Rock. I mean, he teams up with Easy Company to fight some Nazi zombies. That's the story.
Yeah. I mean, what else do you need?
I mean, it's fun. It seems like it's going to be a good time. Bruce Campbell's actually a pretty good writer. For an actor, if anybody has read If Chins Could Kill or his novel,
Did he write The Man with the Screaming Brain?
I think he co-wrote that with,
Okay.
with Ted Raimi.
Okay.
If
That was actually a
memory
really good
serves.
book.
Yeah.
Was that on IDW or Dark Horse?
Oh, the comic?
Yeah.
I think it was a Dark Horse comic.
Okay, yeah. So that's cool. I mean, is it super bloody?
It's a little blood. I mean, it's DC, so it's.
I kind of wish they
terrible.
would go like full Evil Dead,
Yeah.
since Bruce is involved and just like
Well,
just unbelievable gore.
I don't think they wanted to make it a Black Label book,
Why not?
because then you'd have to show penis.
Batman's penis, just exclusively Batman's penis in a Bruce Campbell book.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's a fun book. It's not a lot of thinking required, I guess.
Hey, need that sometimes.
That's my favorite kind of comic, with not a lot of words, which is another reason why I didn't like the Blue Wall book. There was a ton of words.
Right?
Just like, oh, quit explaining yourself.
Yeah, all the important comics have words, and it's a nightmare.
More pictures in my comic books.
Yeah.
That's my plea to the community.
And you know what? Less panels. One panel per
One
page.
panel per page.
No words.
If it can't all be done in one panel, what are we even doing here?
Yeah. Tom King. 9 panels
9
per
panels.
page.
Who the hell do you think you are? He has a book coming out with Phil Hester.
It just came out. Gotham Year 1.
Yes, Gotham Year 1, yeah. So we'll probably cover it next week.
Yeah, it looks good. I just got it the other day.
Looks pretty sick. And that's all you wanted to get out.
I mean, that's the important one. There's a couple other things coming out. Crypt of Shadows came out this week. I haven't read that yet.
Was that like a Marvel team-up book with Moon Knight? Or
I think it's an anthology book. Haven't read it yet. Again.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a spooky season type book.
Speaking of spooky season,
Yeah.
while we're in it to win it, we wanted to go down, kind of talk about some of the scariest books, or maybe not scariest, but some of the comic books that maybe have upset us the most as far as material, left us with that uneasy feeling.
I'll tell you what, guys. Think of what triggers you the most, and let's just like hash it out here.
Well,
What really just gets under your skin and makes you feel bad? Let's talk about it.
so I have my pick, but I'm really glad you phrased it that way just now.
Oh, okay.
Because my pick is Crossed
oh,
by Garth Ennis.
I've
yeah.
never read Crossed.
So I picked it up on a whim. I had to order it from my local store. I was super into Garth Ennis. I was reading everything I could find. I just finished The Boys and Just a Preacher, and I was like, Crossed, it looks like a zombie book. I'm in, right? So I ordered 3 volumes in one go of Crossed, and it is the most disturbing comic I've ever read.
So when I Googled scariest comics, and I read a couple lists, Crossed was on every one of them. What the hell happens in this book? Because I'm not going to read it.
So it's
like, if it makes more than 3 lists of like scariest book, like, no, thank you.
So it's not inherently scary. It's more disturbing, right?
Like Red Room?
Yeah, kind of like Red Room. But it's ostensibly a zombie book, but instead of them being like mindless zombies, the virus makes the cross on their face. That's where it gets the title. And also, like,
they're super smart and manipulative.
Well, so
no.
You like lose your censorship of yourself. So like whatever you truly in your heart of hearts want to do,
oh, that is messed up.
You go and pursue.
If we all had no inhibition, that would be scary.
So it's like Caligula.
Yeah, but it's the whole planet. So everyone's running around, lots of
sex.
Yeah, but
and murder.
Non-consensual anything.
Oh, yikes.
Lots of that.
Okay.
Lots of like people wearing other people's skin as clothes.
Good
Lots
Lord.
of, you name it,
it happens.
It's in this book. Don't read it. I'm like, this is not an endorsement for this book.
Please, no one go read this. I know we're talking about it. Please don't seek it out.
Legitimately, I had the opportunity to sit at the Garth Ennis panel at the last Planet Comic-Con while he's here. And he talked about Crossed a little bit, and he said the point of Crossed was he wanted to address specifically people that say like, oh, if the apocalypse happens, I'm ready, I'm prepared. And he's like, no, you're going to die. Like, if something truly happens, your options are to die or run away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this book is. It's just like people on the run from this literal nightmare, worst case scenario.
Right.
Trying to survive. It's the extreme version of The Walking Dead.
I do love that aspect of it because that seems like it actually has a point and a purpose for existing and like illustrating the barbaricness of the world. And the book I just mentioned, Red Room, just seems like it's like an excuse to be gross and like just draw the do you remember the book that we read?
Yeah, Ed Piskor wrote it.
Ed Piskor,
illustrated it.
And it's just like the gnarliest book for no other reason but to just do it.
That's what Crossed became. So originally, Garth wrote it as like a 6 or 7 issue like mini, and then it ended. But it's on Avatar Press.
Yeah, other people have taken it over.
So somebody took it over and wrote 9 other volumes.
Holy
whatever.
Christ!
I don't know if it went that long, but I know Alan Moore wrote a mini series for it. Garth actually came back and did some more issues for it. So like, it's a long running comic, but it's messed up.
Like what story's left to tell after like 2 volumes?
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Okay. Mine was Revival by Tim Seeley and Jim Norton.
Yeah.
Not Jim Norton. Anyway, it's about it's basically an alien possession story set in this like town that's like secluded from everything else. It happens in the dead of winter, and I really liked it because I like possession stories, and like alien stuff is like really fun to me, and it is kind of captivating, and it is almost like, and not like a who's done it, but just like you don't know where the alien is or who it's in. It's like an invasion of the body snatchers kind of thing, and every issue is like even more upsetting than the next. And like the thing is, like, the alien can actually go into animals too, so it's like you don't know where it's at, or who is safe and who isn't. And then one of the characters is like becomes pregnant, and the alien's also like in there with the baby, so it goes on a wild ride. It went for about 30 or 40 issues, and it's phenomenal. I love it.
The covers are fantastic.
Yeah, Jenny Frison did the covers. Yeah. It's fucking awesome.
Yeah, and
I try to reread it every Halloween time, and it gives you the right kind of goosebumps. Also, Alan Moore's From Hell, which about Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
It's like a masterpiece, and it's huge. It's like a gigantic read, but it is a lot of fun.
Yeah. It's hard for me to articulate like this book scared me, because I think there's something about the medium of comic books that are like not inherently scary.
Yeah, it's hard to jump scare.
Yeah,
in a
exactly right. And so I think kind of what you articulated, Andy, that like sometimes when fucked up things or these situations or conundrums come up in stories that like really stick with you like days afterwards, where you're like, ugh, that's haunting me still.
Right.
Like those are the sort of books that get me. And there's a book that just came out a few months ago that is a psychological thriller sort of book by Zach Thompson called The Brother of All Men.
Oh, okay.
Have you heard of this?
Mm-mm. I like Zach Thompson.
Yeah, it has like a Wicker Man-esque like feel. It's like, I think it's set in the 20s. It's this guy who's like gone off to war, come back. He's a private investigator, and he's investigating this cult that his estranged brother has joined. And he kind of gets stuck on this compound, mixing it up, trying to figure out what the story is with the cult.
Yeah.
And then things get a little more like convoluted and complex for him, and he starts to realize the intricacies of the cult and the power dynamics that exist. And it gets really scary, where you're like, he tried to put himself in the situation to find out something simple, and now he's stuck in this like hyper complex like horror show. And the first 2 issues of that book have just been like pounding the back of my brain.
Holy shit.
And I think it's another one of those things that's like kind of a slow burn horror, where like you're not seeing people murdered, you're not seeing like outright like traditional horror tropes in it, but you can just tell it's going towards a place that's like horrific.
So does the cult know that this guy is there investigating where his brother's at, or like what the cult is, or?
There are a couple people who we get clued in on suspect that he's not there with the right intentions. So that plays to another like weird power dynamic thing of like him either trying to be won over or taken advantage of in other ways, things like that.
Okay.
And I have ordered every cover. Wait, that sounds sick.
Yeah, it's great.
What's it published on?
I think it's Aftershock.
Aftershock. Okay. Ooh, they do good shit.
Yeah.
Always good to get an Aftershock book in there.
Please. All right, does that do it for Spooky Week?
I think I am chilled to the bone. I can't
take
handle
another minute of
any
conversation.
more of comic book conversation. My hair is standing up on end, and my eyes are popping out like I have just seen a ghost or a poltergeist.
Oh, not like you saw a sexy lady in a comic or a
No,
cartoon?
no,
Not
my
like
pupils aren't hearts.
Got
Yeah.
it.
My tongue isn't hanging out
Yeah,
from just going, ooga.
I didn't hear awooga, so that should have been the
Right.
first clue.
And like steam wasn't coming out from my collar. So this is less sexy eye popping, more scared eye popping.
Yeah, check.
But thank you for asking me, because there is a distinction there that not a lot of people talk about. Thank you, Tex Avery.
Either way, we got to make the episode explicit.
yeah.
It is too hot for young readers' ears. Anyway, thanks for listening. Have a great Halloween. Watch out for that weird drug that's now in candy, I guess.
Oh, great.
What's it? It's like ketamine or something.
I have not heard of this.
I don't know. It's probably not in there. Just make sure your kids eat all the candy. And have a good time.
Bye. First Issue Club is edited and produced by Mike DeStacy and Greg Lichtite. Follow us on social media at First Issue Club, and check out our Patreon for videos, audio, and more at patreon.com/firstissueclub.